Hello guys, this is Jesse from Canada. I'm going to give you some updates in immigration, refugee, citizenship in Canada. So ang mga bagay na ito ay mahalaga because marami ang maapektuhan ito tulad ng skilled worker and international student na kasama ang mga asawa nila at mga anak at ang kanilang pag-apply ng open work permit. Para sa mga skilled worker at international students, so meron lamang isang principal applicant for a couple o mag-asawa. So this is very important for these changes. So let's watch this.
The latest update from Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. And this one is actually quite an important one. It's going to affect a lot of people that are looking at applying to Canada under certain streams, and it's really probably going to affect a lot of people's immigration plans or anything that they might have mapped out. Because the changes that have come into place and been announced today is going to apply to anybody who is looking at either working in Canada as a skilled worker, so on a work permit, or going to Canada as an international student and is planning on their spouse coming with them and obtaining an open work permit. So these changes are all going to affect open work permits for the spouses of international students and skilled workers. So there's several changes that are being implemented. Some of them, honestly, I think are kind of great because there was some pretty big loopholes there that people were using that didn't make a lot of sense to me why they were there. But unfortunately for some people, those are not going to be closed up. And the other ones are not so great. They're going to affect some people quite dramatically. So we're going to go through each of the changes individually, just so you can understand how they might affect you going forward. Some people are already in the country. This might affect what they're looking at getting at their next stage of permits. So this could affect people already in Canada and people looking to come to Canada and already planning their way to Canada. So let's go through all of the different changes stage by stage. So the first stage is just saying that there's only one principal applicant for a couple. And this is going to become important when we get to some of the follow-up changes. But what this means by one principal applicant is if I am going to go as an international student and my husband is coming with me, because I applied for the study permit and he was applying for the spousal open work permit if he's eligible, I'm the main applicant for the family. So one principal applicant. So if later on, and this is where some of the changes come, so you are going to go through that. If I was trying to get an open work permit based on his open work permit, so I was trying to say, okay, well, I quit school, and because my husband had an open work permit and he's working in a skilled occupation now, I'm going to apply for an open work permit as the spouse of a skilled worker. Well, they say, no, you can't do that anymore because he was not the principal applicant for the family. So you can't have that open work permit now. Only the spouse of the first principal applicant can. So they're closing that loophole. So basically, if I come as an international student, my husband had an open work permit, I cannot quit school and then try to apply for an open work permit as the spouse of a skilled worker. That's no longer allowed. So open work permits for spouses, if they are on an open work permit that was issued under exemption codes C41 and C42, you're no longer allowed an open work permit. Now, what C41 is, that was the spouse of a skilled worker. Okay, so what's going to happen in this case? Now, let's say that I had a job offer and the employer had done a labor market impact assessment and I was applying for my employer-specific work permit to go work in Canada. As long as I was a skilled worker, so my job met all the requirements, then my husband was eligible for an open work permit. So we fly over to Canada. I'm the principal applicant for the family and we get there and let's just say I quit my job. Okay, because my husband had an open work permit valid for the 2 years, Before, in some cases, well, I could have quit my job, and then if he was working in a skilled position, I could have applied for a new open work permit as the spouse of a skilled worker. Well, now they're saying, no, you can't do that. If we came in and I was the main applicant and I had the work permit, he had the spousal open work permit, I can no longer try to get a new work permit based on his. So if I lose my job or I quit my job, I can't work. I'm just in Canada. His work permit doesn't expire or become invalid, but I can't work and I can't apply for any kind of new work permit. So that option has now been taken away. So if you are in Canada and you were maybe planning on quitting your job or trying to change employers and you were looking at doing it in that fashion, you no longer can take advantage of that loophole. They've closed it up. Now, the next change that they've done is really going to affect a lot of international students. So previously, a lot of spouses could get open work permits if they were accompanying their spouse who was going to be studying in Canada. Well, now what they've said is if you're applying for a spousal open work permit and you're the main applicant of the family is going to be studying, the only way for your spouse to get that open work permit is if you are studying a program that is eligible for a postgraduate work permit. So if you are now studying a program that is not eligible for that postgraduate work permit, your spouse is not eligible to apply for an open work permit anymore. So that has also been taken away now. The last thing that they mentioned, and it's quite important because I think I've seen it happen a little bit more, especially during COVID, people not wanting to leave the country and finding ways to stay. So they're going to be assessing the genuineness of relationships a lot more. So they want to make sure the relationship is not being entered into just for immigration purposes. You didn't just get married so that you can hop onto somebody else's status and get an open work permit from them. Or, common law relationships maybe might be a little more common, especially with COVID and people staying in Canada, and maybe it's easier to show common law relationship because it's maybe your roommate, things like that. But they have said that now they are going to be assessing the genuineness of relationships a lot more for these spousal open work permits. So just keep that in mind. What they might be asking you for, they could come back and ask for additional documents if they don't genuinely believe that you're in a relationship that was not entered into just for immigration purposes. So just be mindful of that. They are going to be a little bit more cautious with that and investigating it a little bit more. So to recap, because I know some of this maybe I was jumping around because it is quite a bit of information, okay? So for a family, there is one principal applicant and you can't change that later. So if I entered Canada as a student, I was the principal applicant, my spouse was accompanying. That means that later on, my spouse can no longer be the principal applicant, and I can't try to apply for any spousal open work permits based on their work permit. So they're closing that loophole, okay? Anyone who is accompanying an international student as a spouse or common law partner, you're only going to be eligible for that spousal open work permit if your spouse or partner is studying a program that is eligible for a postgraduate work permit. They are going to be assessing the genuineness of relationships a lot more going forward to make sure that it is a legitimate relationship and not just being used for immigration purposes. And then also, if you came to Canada as a skilled worker, again, if I came over on an employer-specific work permit, again, I'm the principal applicant. If my spouse got an open work permit, I couldn't quit my job, or if I was fired, I couldn't turn around and apply for an open work permit as a spouse of a skilled worker because my spouse was not the principal applicant for the family. So I'm not allowed to then try and get a new work permit. So I wouldn't be allowed to work in Canada. I would just be there now accompanying my spouse who is working on their permit. So again, it's closing a few loopholes. It's going to be restricting some people. So these are changes that are going to affect a lot of people going forward.
So ayun nga guys, I hope nakatulong sa inyo yung update na to. So galing sa Immigration Refugee Citizenship in Canada. So guys, sa madaling salita guys, So, wala na tayong ibang option sa pag-a-apply ng work permit. Hindi na tayo pwedeng magpalit kagaya ng nakaraang taon na pwede tayo magpalit ng status. So, kunyari yung asawa mo nandito na, so pwede kang, kung skilled worker ka, so gusto mo mag-quit sa trabaho mo at yung asawa mo ang magtatrabaho kasi meron siyang open work permit, so hindi na siya pwedeng gawin ngayon. So, ang mangyayari, hindi ka pwedeng mag-quit kasi ikaw ang principal applicant. So, hindi rin pwedeng mag-change yung asawa mo kasi ang status lang niya is open work permit. So, ganun din sa international student. Kung i-apply ng international student yung asawa niya ng open work permit, so hindi sila pwedeng mag-quit as a international student. And kasi nagtatrabaho na yung asawa niya. So, hindi na ganun, guys. So, good luck na lang, guys, sa inyo. So, I hope nakatulong. And guys, don't forget to subscribe and comment na rin kung may mga tanong kayo. So, para sa bagong update ng immigration, refugee, citizenship in Canada. So, thank you.